Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're shifting gears a bit in our sociological explorations. You're probably familiar with the big picture stuff, society structures, power, conflict, functionalism, Marxism, those grand designs.
Right. The macro level.
Exactly. But what if we flip the lens? What happens when we zoom right in on the everyday stuff, the interactions, the individual choices that actually, well, build our social world from the bottom up?
That's precisely where social action theories come in. They give us this really crucial micro-level view. It's a way to understand society not just as some, huge structure pressing down on us, but as something dynamic, something we create through meanings, symbols, and our actions.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. Let's
Yeah.
really unpack these social action theories. We want to get a handle on how they shed light on those seemingly small details, a gesture, a word, how we interpret things, and how all that adds up.
Yeah, how those micro-interactions shape our reality.
And we're drawing on social action theories in sociology, which is geared specifically for you listening if you're an A-level sociology student.
And honestly, digging into this will be so valuable for your studies. These theories offer different ways to look at social issues, fresh angles that can, really deepen your understanding and give you great comparison points for essays and exams.
Okay, let's get into it, starting with a really big name, Max Weber. Now, Weber wasn't just throwing out the idea of social structures completely, was he?
No, not at all. Weber had a really nuanced take on it, like a kind of dual focus. He absolutely recognized those broader structures, what he called the level of cause. They definitely shape what we do.
Right.
But, and this is the key thing for him, he really insisted on the importance of the level of meaning.
Hmm.
That's the subjective understanding, the interpretation that we bring to our actions. For Weber, you can't really understand why people do things without grasping both sides, the external pressures and their internal reasons.
And it's from that dual focus he came up with, his 4 types of social action. Can you walk us through those, maybe with examples a student might recognize?
Sure thing. So first up, you've got instrumentally rational action. This is basically logical, efficient action to achieve a specific goal. Think about, say, revising for a major exam.
Okay.
You're probably planning your time, figuring out which topics need most work, maybe using specific techniques, flashcards, mind maps, whatever. It's all calculated to get the best possible result, right? That's instrumental rationality.
Makes total sense. Very goal-driven. What's next?
Next is value rational action. Now here, the driving force is a strong belief in the value of the action itself, kind of regardless of the outcome. Imagine a student who dedicates loads of time to volunteering for a cause they deeply believe in, even if it means less social time or it affects their part-time job.
Ah, so it's not about the practical payoff. It's about doing what feels right according to your values.
Exactly. It's driven by conviction. Then number 3 is traditional action. This is stuff we do out of habit, custom. It's just
Yeah.
the way things are done.
Like rituals or routines.
Yeah. Think about following school rules almost automatically or participating in family traditions without really thinking why. It's familiar, it's expected, almost unconscious sometimes.
Like social muscle memory.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, there's effectual action. This one's all about emotion, acting based on your feelings in the moment.
Like,
Well, like cheering spontaneously when you get good exam results, or maybe slamming a book shut in frustration when you just can't grasp a concept. It's driven by joy, anger, fear, whatever the feeling is right then.
so Weber's really pushing us as sociology students to look beyond just the surface behavior. We need to ask why. What does this action mean to the person doing it?
Absolutely. Structure might set the stage, as it were, but it's our interpretations that direct our actions on that stage. And this focus on meaning, well, is the absolute foundation for symbolic interactionism.
Right, and SI, that really zooms in on symbols, doesn't it?
Totally. Symbolic interactionism is all about how we create, share, and interpret symbols, language, gestures, even clothes, and how these symbols shape everything, our interactions, how we see the world. The basic idea is we don't just react automatically, we react based on the meaning we give to things.
So a school uniform isn't just clothes, it's a symbol of belonging, maybe rules.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And a giant in this area is George Herbert Mead. Mead argued fundamentally that we act towards things based on the meanings we assign to them. And crucially, these meanings aren't fixed. They actually come from our interactions with other people. We're constantly adjusting them.
And Mead's concept of taking the role of the other, that feels really central here.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Mead's idea was that we figure out who we are, our sense of self, by imagining how other people see us. By mentally putting ourselves in their shoes, we can sort of guess how they might react, and then we adjust what we do.
So you anticipate responses.
Exactly. And this ability, seeing ourselves from the outside, is just vital for growing up socially, for interacting smoothly. How might you see that working in, say, a classroom discussion as a student?
Well, I guess if I take the role of the teacher, I might anticipate the kind of answer they're looking for. Or if I see a classmate looks confused, I might try to explain something differently.
Perfect. And Charles Cooley, he built on this with his idea of the looking glass self.
That's the famous one: we see ourselves reflected in how others react to us.
That's the one. Our idea of who we are is massively shaped by how we think others see us. If we perceive that people think we're funny or smart or maybe awkward, we tend to internalize that. But, oh, that also means labeling can be really powerful, right?
Definitely. Which brings us straight to Howard Becker and labeling theory.
Yeah, Becker really dug into how labels aren't just descriptions. They can actually define a situation and have huge consequences. If a teacher consistently labels a student as, say, bright or maybe lazy,
It affects how everyone treats them.
exactly how teachers interact, how other students see them, and maybe most importantly, how that student starts to see themselves. It links back to W.Y. Thomas's point. If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences.
Wow. So a label, even if it starts off wrong, can actually make itself come true. Like if you're told you're good at research, you might start doing more research, get better at it, and sort of live up to the label.
Precisely. Or the opposite labeled as struggling, you might lose confidence, avoid the difficult tasks, and then struggle more. Labels have real power. They shape reality.
Okay, so labels shape reality. What about Irving Goffman? He uses that theater metaphor, doesn't he? The dramaturgical model.
Yes, Goffman gives us this incredibly vivid way of seeing social life. He basically said, think of society as a stage, and we are all actors performing roles.
Max found that such a cool idea.
It really is.
Yeah.
So Goffman talks about the front stage. That's our public performance, how we act when we know others are watching, when we're trying to project a certain image. Then there's the backstage.
Where we relax, drop the act.
Exactly. Our private space where we prepare, let our guard down. Think about how you might act giving a presentation in front of the class that's front stage. How you act studying alone, maybe complaining about the work that's backstage.
Right, totally different.
And we use props, our clothes, books, phones, and follow scripts. The sort of expected ways to behave in different situations, like a classroom or a party, all to manage the impression we give off. And for Goffman, identity isn't fixed, it's fluid. We adjust our performance based on the audience, the context.
A very dynamic view of who we are. Okay, so we've got symbols, labels, performance. Let's shift slightly to phenomenology. Alfred Schutz. This sounds like it's going deeper into our own heads.
It does, yeah. Phenomenologists like Schutz are interested in our subjective experience, how we actually perceive and make sense of the world. He argued we don't just experience raw reality, we experience it through existing mental frameworks. He called them typifications.
Typifications. Okay, that's a key term for students listening.
Yeah.
What exactly are they?
Think of them as, like, shared categories, common sense understandings, mental boxes we use to organize everything we experience. When you enter a library, you have a typification of library, quiet, books, librarians, certain rules.
So you know what to expect, how to act.
Exactly. Without these shared typifications, interacting would be chaotic. We wouldn't know how to interpret what others are doing or what's expected of us. They make social life possible, really.
So they're like essential mental shortcuts for navigating the world.
That's a good way to think of it. Schutz actually called these shared meanings recipes for interaction. They create social order because they allow us to act in fairly predictable ways and understand others. How vital are those recipes when you, say, start a new course and need to figure out how things work?
Oh, completely vital. You're looking for cues, trying to understand the unspoken rules, the shared understanding of how lectures work or seminars. Yeah.
Right. And sort of building on this, but asking a slightly different question, is ethnomethodology associated with Harold Garfinkel?
Ethnomethodology. Okay, how does that differ from phenomenology then?
Well, if phenomenology asks what are the shared meanings, ethnomethodology asks how do we actually create and maintain those meanings in our moment-to-moment interactions. Garfinkel said social order isn't just there, it's something we're constantly actively accomplishing.
Accomplishing.
Through using our common sense knowledge, our taken for granted assumptions about how the world works, it's about the practical everyday methods we use to make sense of things together.
So it's really focused on the doing of social order.
Exactly. And a key idea here is indexicality. which basically means that meaning is always tied to context. What something means depends entirely on the situation, who's saying it, when, where.
Right, like a joke told to a friend means something different than if you told it in a formal job interview.
Absolutely. Context is everything. And Garfinkel argued we create this sense of order by sort of papering over the cracks. We assume there's more stability and shared understanding than maybe there actually is. We're constantly filling in gaps to make things seem coherent.
That sounds potentially quite fragile. How did he show that?
Well, famously through his breaching experiments.
Yeah.
These were designed to deliberately mess up those taken for granted norms.
Mess him up how?
He'd have his students act like lodgers in their own homes or constantly ask for clarification of really obvious statements like, what exactly do you mean by how are you? Or, imagine someone suddenly trying to bargain over the price of milk in a supermarket.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be awkward.
Exactly. These breaches, they make people really uncomfortable because they expose the hidden assumptions and the constant background work we're all doing to keep social interactions smooth. It shows how much effort goes into maintaining order.
That's a really powerful way to reveal those invisible rules. Okay, so we've journeyed through Weber, SI, phenomenology, ethnomethodology. Pulling it together, what would you say are the main strengths of these social action theories overall?
Well, first off, they really emphasize individual agency, our ability to act and interpret and shape the social world, not just be pushed around by structures. That's huge.
Okay, agency. What else?
They give us fantastic tools for understanding face-to-face interactions, the nuances, the subjective meanings people hold, which structural theories sometimes miss. And third, they've been incredibly useful for analyzing things like identity formation, how labels work, deviance, stigma, really rich areas.
But like any perspective, they're not the whole story. What are the main criticisms you hear?
Yeah, fair point. A major criticism is that they can sometimes neglect the big picture, those macro-level structures like social class or patriarchy or systemic racism. By focusing so much on the micro, critics say they might downplay how these larger forces constrain our interactions and choices.
So maybe too focused on the trees, not seeing the forest?
Kind of, yeah. Some also argue it's harder to generalize from small-scale studies. And some approaches, maybe phenomenology or ethnomethodology, can feel a bit abstract or difficult to apply in concrete research for some people.
And this loops us back to that crucial point for you sociology students listening, the need to see how these microtheories connect, or maybe contrast, with the macrostructural ones.
Exactly. It's not about picking sides, like interactionism is right and functionalism is wrong. It's about seeing how they offer different complementary insights. Think about education again.
Okay.
A structuralist might look at how class background affects exam results across the whole system. An interactionist might go into one classroom and study teacher-student interactions, labeling, how students form friendships and identities within that setting.
So one gives you the broad patterns, the other gives you the lived experience within those patterns. You kind of need both views.
Precisely. Using different theoretical lenses together gives you a much richer, more complete sociological understanding.
So to wrap up, the big takeaway from social action theories is, well, that society isn't just this external force acting on us. It's something we're constantly making and remaking through our interactions, our interpretations, our shared meanings.
Absolutely. And for you, as students, getting your head around these micro-perspectives gives you incredibly powerful tools for analyzing pretty much any social situation you can think of, from your own identity to how your classes work to wider social issues.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As you go about your day, maybe start looking at your own interactions through these lenses. Consider how you're managing impressions, like Goffman suggested, or how shared understanding Schutz's typifications are making things work smoothly, or perhaps how context changes meaning, like
Yeah.
Garfinkel showed. How are your actions contributing to the social world around you?
Yeah, definitely. And don't be afraid to dig a bit deeper into these thinkers if something sparked your interest. Maybe even try some, careful observation, ethically, of course,
Yeah.
of how people maintain social order in everyday places. It's fascinating stuff.